Good morning, good evening, everyone. This is Luda Kopikina with GAI Insights. Welcome to Daily AI News Review, where we mark articles essential, important, and optional, helping you navigate through this mass of news in AI that happen every day. And we point out trends, we point out interesting developments, so we discuss it. So, welcome. You can monitor along, read the articles there at giinsights.com slash articles. I have Adam, Tim, and Ankash today, and we have 6 cool articles to talk about. So let's start with the first one. Please, Ankash.
Sure, thanks, Luda. So the first one that we have for today comes from Stanford University and talks about the 2025 AI Index report.
Yeah, this group has done these reports for 7 years now, and it has great data. It has they try to summarize the trends and what's happening with the industry and the tools and the like. And so it's a longish report, but here's the summary. What did you think about this, Adam?
Look, it would be hard not to say this is essential. At least this single page here that has the top 10 takeaways. I would recommend everyone just scan it, have an understanding of where it's coming from. This is out of the AI, at Harvard, and they've done a ton of work here. They've pulled a lot of really great information together, and yeah, there is a lot to the index report, and even just to scan this summary page, absolutely, I would say it's essential for everyone.
Yeah, you mean at Stanford, right? So you said at Harvard. You meant
Oh yeah. Sorry, it was the HAI. The H was throwing me off.
Stanford people will be very upset, but
yeah,
they're both red, so it's easy to confuse.
That's true. So what did you think about this, Tim?
I agree. I mean, it's not just generative AI; it's all AI. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and it's probably not going to be earth-shattering to anybody who's familiar with this, but to those unfamiliar, it'll be quite revealing, I think, and generally does have a lot of good data, and there's lots behind it. So you read the summary page, and if you're interested, there's lots of data to drill down on. It's Stanford, so you got to assume the work is reasonably well done. So yeah, essential.
If I could just, Ankash, scroll down to number 9 there. It's the chart of where AI and computer sciences is taught at what grade levels. And at first I wasn't sure what it was showing, and then I realized that that's showing Australia as one of the world leaders, which means we teach CS in both primary and secondary as mandatory, which is just a really interesting lens to put on the growth and the progression in the future.
Yeah, and in the US, it's 81% of K-12 computer science teachers say AI should be part of the curriculum, but they don't necessarily don't feel equipped to teach it. So this is a shame, and I hope it will change because it absolutely has to happen.
Well, we could say the same thing about English and math, but that's another story.
Yes, true. So sad, but true. So Tim, any other, and Adam, any other out of these 10 that struck you as worth mentioning?
Not me. I mean, again, I guess, we have to remember that a lot of the world doesn't read this stuff daily. So in brief summary, the models are improving in capability very rapidly. They're dropping dramatically in price. So it's getting more and more widespread. They're becoming more embedded into more activities across more industries. And there's very little attention being paid to safety at the end of the day. Those are the highlights, I would say.
Yeah. And they talk about complex reasoning being still a challenge. So the models excel on...
Still challenging, but again, if you look at the graphs, they're all up and to the right. They're getting better and better and better.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have said that about basic stuff 2 years ago. If you look at ChatGPT 3 and 3.5 compared to the current robots out there, the chat models out there, even non-reasoning, they're far superior. And a lot of people said way back then they'll never get any better. They got a lot better.
Yep.
So we don't know, but right now the evidence is they're continuing to improve rapidly and drop in cost.
Yep. Okay. So essentially this. Let's proceed to the next one. Amkash?
Yes, Luda. So the next one that we have comes from the CSO magazine, and it talks about the risks of entry-level developers over relying on AI.
Yeah, an article about all these risks and what has been happening with with relying on AI. What do you think about this, Tim?
Well, I think it's much ado about nothing at one level, though it is relevant in the short term. So there's always this concern, and there's a legitimate concern where high-level semantic knowledge is required for any task, which is most of the tasks that these generative AI bots are taking on now. How do you have an apprenticeship for humans if you want to get the next level of senior people? So we have a level of senior people, but what happens when we need the next level of senior people? That's a semi-legitimate concern, I would say, right now, because if you start to replace all the entry-level work with AI robots, then the entry-level people don't get that apprenticeship that they get normally. So that's a real issue for a lot of knowledge work. On the other hand, this is a trope, if you will, that gets played out over and over and over again. Oh, well, if we forget how to write, it'll be terrible for us because we have typewriters and only type. That was a thing back in the day, that computers were going to really destroy the human race because we were not going to be able to write longhand anymore. And we can have a debate about whether it was good or bad that we gave up mostly longhand writing, but it didn't destroy humanity by any means. And the calculators are another simple example where we have very good calculators do all sorts of fancy calculations, and spreadsheets that go even further. And a lot of people said, "Oh my God, nobody's going to be able to do any math anymore." Most of those people, in my opinion, did not understand what math was in the first place. But that's another discussion. But the issue is, when these technologies come along, they do displace activities. And if those activities are really important activities, you can have problems. So I think the other side of it is, yes, but actually what this is saying is critical thinking is really important. And I would say, great. I agree 100%. In fact, the biggest problem we have in education around the world is we focus on vocation rather than critical thinking skills. And we get more critical thinking skills developed both early and in college and graduate schools, we'd be a lot better off across the board. And these tools enable us to focus more on critical thinking because we have less to do in terms of, the apprentice work, drudge work of really doing stuff that is not at all involved in critical thinking. So it's kind of surprising in security that they're talking about, well, the young people coming up or the entry level people won't really be able to think critically. They aren't thinking critically. They're just being told, go write this script, go do this thing on that infrastructure, go write this program. They're not being given much critical thinking skills unless they have great mentors. And fortunately, we usually run into one or two really good mentors who applies that effort to get us to think critically. So I could also argue it's a big benefit because there'll be more time for critical thinking about how does this fit into an overall security architecture. But I rambled on too long here, so I'll stop there and say, I think this is optional, may be important for the reader.
Okay, optional. Well said, by the way, Tim. Optional may be important. Adam.
Tim, if you can please mute. I'm getting an echo. That would be great. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think you said it brilliantly, Tim, and it's it's worth. I was on the fence as well. I don't think it adds anything new. I think we've had this conversation before. It is an important point, but I think it's a fairly obvious one at this point. The commentary you've added is the less obvious point that this article doesn't quite get around to making in itself, which is how do we fill that skills gap to the senior people with the critical thinking if we don't have sort of apprentices because we have co-pilots. Yeah. So I guess that's the question that remains to be answered. But this article certainly didn't move the needle in that area, in my opinion. Yeah. So I was probably optional.
Yeah, I was optional as well, because it really didn't answer the question it posed. Yeah. And it's hard to answer, but it didn't really propose anything. So optional in my view. Okay with optional, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's proceed then, Ankash, please.
Okay, the next one comes from Microsoft and talks about shaping the future of product engineering and research and development with GenAI.
Yeah, I marked this article as optional. For the manufacturers, I think it's important to read through this. So it talks about how manufacturers are adopting Gen AI, and especially in product engineering, and what it can do for them. And it further talks about the securing of data and the layer that Gen AI sits on, and how, because it's all IP really, it's product drawings, it's data about the products, it's designs of all kinds. And so keeping it secure is very important. And they talk about how manufacturers, Siemens, PTC, produced frameworks around that, and how they are being deployed. And then they come up with a number of examples, specifically about digital threads. So it's not digital twins per se, it's digital threads. So it's information about an asset, say a piece of large equipment on the floor, from the very beginning of the design, initial design, to all the way to the maintenance data. So piecing it together and having it at your fingertip is a very important set of data. And so they talk about it quite a bit, of how people are doing it, meaning Siemens, Hexagon, Harting examples. So I thought it had a lot to offer to the manufacturers, but for the general public, maybe optional. What did you think about this, Tim?
Yeah, I would agree. I might give it an important, just because the part, I think it was on the design part or the coding part, they did give some really good statistics. So they're still specific to manufacturing, and a lot of this was just, hey, isn't it great that all these firms are using Microsoft stuff? So it was a big ad for Microsoft through most of the article in the manufacturing space. But that one little part where they said, we got 75% savings here and 50% savings there and 70 minutes a week here, those were pretty impressive statistics. So, part of me says, well, okay, you have to kind of work your way through the article to get to that one little list. But that one little list was pretty good.
Okay, so I wouldn't argue with important. Adam?
Yeah, I think for those fairly hard-hitting quantitative use cases alone, it's probably important. But man, if I just bookmarked this article, and anytime I needed to understand anything about the Microsoft cloud and AI space, there's a link to it in this article. I mean, right there, it's Teams, OpenAI Service, Copilot Studio on Azure. They get into 5.4, Azure Databricks, Azure Cosmos DB, and then what is it even? Oh, then they get into the Microsoft 365 Copilot as well. So it pretty much has links to everything that Microsoft offers. It's a pretty good landscape piece, I guess, in that regard, and understanding both the breadth and the depth of their capabilities per industry, and what they're doing with those 5.4, those really small models at the edge. Or they're doing it here, but they're doing it in verticals, right? Because that's exactly the model with that, is through that fine tuning They get these very small, powerful models that are purpose built for a specific use cases like this one. So
Yeah.
it's probably worth taking note of the way they're approaching this, and just the extent of the landscape as well as those
Yeah.
use cases.
And the notion about threads, I think, was very interesting. That is a little bit different. So let's mark it as important for those reasons. And I think another point is that manufacturing is usually very slow and lagging behind a lot of industries. They're very scary of change, and it just usually lagging, right? But here you have implementations with results, and they in production, and so this is a cool perspective from that point of view. All right, important it is. Let's proceed.
Okay, the next one comes from OpenAI and talks about how Notion and OpenAI are bringing intelligence to every workflow.
Yeah, what did you think about this, Adam?
Yeah, that's me. Thanks. Forgive the pun, but it really is an interesting notion, what they've done in terms of rebuilding their product from the ground up when OpenAI came on the scene 2 years ago, and they have had early access to many of the models, and have really worked with OpenAI the whole way. And this is an OpenAI product piece about how they and Notion have moved this whole space forward and really integrated from the ground up what's possible with their inference and their large language models into a platform like Notion. If people aren't aware of what Notion is and what it can do, it's sort of like a collaborative workspace and a sketchpad and a notepad, and you can work with teams there, and it's a collaborative platform, basically almost like a canvas, and it has tons of great features via OpenAI on it. This is mostly a product piece. If people are already familiar with Notion, this is probably optional news, but it's certainly very, very cool to see the way they've collaborated and really reinvented and rebuilt Notion with AI at its core.
Yeah. Okay, optional suggestion, Tim?
I was leaning towards important because, again, the statistics they cite at the end are pretty impressive. So they didn't give a lot of detail on it, but they gave enough. So it was better than the usual OpenAI use case, I would say, which generally is just very high level. And I guess I could go either way. It's mostly just a little bit of a puff piece about how Notion and OpenAI love each other. But this is, pretty impressive stuff. So again, for a use case, it isn't bad, and this is a well-known company, pretty fair. Advanced. So
I'm a bit jaded. I'm like, the 70 minutes a week is just from things like summarization and content generation, though.
But it's 70 minutes a week. It's
exactly. It's still 70 minutes a week. That's right.
That's that's an hour plus a week, right? So I could go either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the comment there about that 2/3 of the users who use the AI features become more active in the product. Like that's a really interesting signal to the market in terms of ways bringing AI into your own products can help with retention.
Yeah, I would go optional on this one, even though it is you point out good things about Notion, but it is a puff piece. It really is. So that's why just singling, not this particular article, but in general, we know from the benefits from the summarization and all of that, doing, especially in teams when people can get out various milestones very much quicker than alone and the like. So yeah, I think it's optional. But here we have Vivek arguing that it will be essential when OpenAI operator can go and execute the workflows. Yeah, that's the next step. Agree. But let's mark it as optional and proceed by the power of the chalk.
Yep. The next one comes from the technology review and talks about how cyber attacks by AI agents are coming.
Yeah. Today, Tim, you are the cyber attack expert. What do you think about this one?
I think this is, optional, maybe important for the cybersecurity specialists. It is interesting. Maybe we should say important. I think Paul would probably, I'll channel my inner Paul, would probably argue important because people just don't pay enough attention to security in general. But there's not a lot of actionable information here. I mean, anybody who's in an AI leadership position who isn't thinking about security pretty carefully, I think, has got bigger issues. And for those that are thinking about it, this is interesting, but it's future oriented. There's some research they're doing that's interesting, but nothing that is really going to change the mindset or change the specific things that somebody would want to do tomorrow. So I think I would classify this as optional.
Yeah. Okay. Adam?
So I was feeling that way, Tim, and I actually just copied the whole page and pasted it into GPT-4o and said, is there anything really new or insightful here? This feels like 1 to 2 year old news mostly. And it said, you're right to be skeptical. Almost everything in here is from the last 12 to 24 months, like agents used in cybersecurity and offense, early 2023. Autonomous reconnaissance and targeting, early 2023. Prompt injection honeypots, early 2023. In Gen AI, those sorts of threat vectors, that's basically an eternity. That's like from the beginning. So it really didn't add much to the conversation. There was a couple newer studies, but that were fairly small, that sort of pointed in some interesting directions. But I felt it was optional as well.
Okay. Very convincing, Adam. Thank you. And thank you for putting it into...
Thank the AI, yeah.
Oh,
GPT-4o has gotten much better. I keep telling people that, but they forget to go back and give it a try.
Yeah, it is really good.
Higher numbers and stuff, but it's gotten much better.
Yeah. Okay. Let's mark it as optional because I read this article. I love the honey, the picture and the whole notion of putting together the information that might be interesting to attackers and catching them and seeing who is actually attracted to this honey. It's a fascinating concept, but it is old. It's not just current, right?
Luda, if I may, I forgot, and I think we have time. At the end of the response from GPT-4o, it had a bar, and then it said summary, overall insight rating, 4.5 out of 10. The article acts more like a public primer than an industry-shaking revelation. It's useful for surfacing the issue in mainstream discourse, but it doesn't introduce significantly new research or theory, just a bit of empirical evidence and updated quotes.
Yeah, a very glowing negative review. Okay, sounds good. Optional it is. Thank you, Adam. Let's go next one, Ankash, please.
So the last one comes from VentureBeat and talks about GenSpark's super agent.
Yeah, I rated that important, if not essential. So this is about GenSpark. This is a new general AI agent who can actually execute tasks on their own, and this is available for people to try. I haven't compared it with Manus because I'm still waiting for to get access, but Manus is also another one that just came out just recently, as you probably know. So it's a super agent, they call it, and is able to do tasks on their own. By mainly cobbling together an ability to access various tools. We had this long academic survey, was it yesterday, that talked about what are the ways to get those type of agents together and where the industry is. And here we go. Next day, we have it. So I thought it is very important for AI leaders to know about it, even though the examples here are all consumer type, but it's certainly applicable to the enterprise. What did you think about this, Tim?
Well, I rated it optional because it's a product announcement at the end of the day. Brand new product. Nobody's really used it yet. Very interesting space, interesting approach. They raise lots of money, another everyday miracle in my mind. And especially until it's proven, It just, I'm very skeptical of product announcements.
Well, yes, this might be a demonstration of using LLMs as engines, like we talked about, and cobbling other tools to put them on the road.
Yeah.
And that's a new stage of development of Gen AI, essentially. So that's why I was thinking important. But Adam,
Yeah, I have to push back a little bit.
okay,
It's a new stage in that you don't have to use LangChain or other more complex developer tools to do it.
yeah,
Actually, this stuff has been being done for a while. This is just a little bit easier and
true.
more convenient, and so more broadly accessible and a little bit more integrated and autonomous. But they gave pretty straightforward examples that you could have done a year and a half ago if you were willing to use LangChain or something like that. So not all that exciting for and again, it's a product announcement. It's really interesting. This is an interesting space. We're seeing a lot of movement, but I'm from Missouri on this one. I want to see some actual use in production.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And you're right, the tools existed. This brought it to the level of every person is able to use it. Adam, maybe you can
Find the middle path. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
I thought it was important news. It's the best thing out there basically at this point was a Chinese model, and to have this as a competitor and to demonstrate that other people can and will continue to develop at that level is important. In the early OpenAI days, we had what we said were like GPT wrappers, right? People would build things around it, and this, as far as I see it, I'm starting to classify this in Manos as basically Claude wrappers and or MCP wrappers. So the model context protocol, which it even says in here is lesser known, is really the secret sauce. And the fact that they are using what they say the 3 pillars, so it's 9 different LLMs, over 80 tools, and 10 proprietary data sets, that's their secret sauce. But they're using the same ingredients to stitch this together in many ways that Manus did. To Tim's point, which is why I probably thought important at most, is it's in many ways doing the same thing Manos was doing, just it's come as a later mover. So it's easier for them to orchestrate it at a larger level, to have more tools, to package it up nicer with more capabilities. Manos didn't have the voice calling integrated, but he's absolutely right. You could build that with LangChain. You just don't have to build it anymore, and we're having to build less and less. It's probably an important trend, but I would say important at most. I would be okay with optional probably as well, in that it is the product announcement.
Well, we have Vivek here voting for important, thinking that it enables quick prototyping, things like that. So it's a step. Despite the fact that technically I don't think they advanced anything, and there will be more tools like that, maybe specialized in industries, but and they certainly are using MCP, that we knew when it was announced that this is a fundamental new step, right? And we're now seeing it in action. So I grant that, Tim, you are saying it's a product announcement, but people are they're trying it, and it's not in enterprises, but I think it is important news. So
I will call out, just so that it isn't lost, deep down in the article, it does in one paragraph lay out the landscape pretty well. It mentions Microsoft's Copilot Studio, OpenAI's Agent SDK, and Amazon's recently announced Nova Act. So it does give a good snapshot there of who some of the other major competitors are that are at the enterprise level, bringing these types of solutions to market.
Yeah, and Vivek is asking how many leaders are aware of this trend. I don't know, but I think they should be, because this is where autonomous AI agents would come from, really. This is the cobbling together the structure that we already have, right? And you can just do it for your vertical. So it's important from that perspective. Okay, important it is. Tim, okay?
Of course. I just get a vote.
All right, important it is. So as Ankash is preparing the scorecard, any announcement? Adam, I know you will be traveling on vacation for a while. Tim, anything to announce?
No, we had an interesting call last night on the Learning Lab. So if you want to view the replay of that, I think you'll find it interesting. A broad discussion on lots of topics. And as Paul has noted, the big conference is coming up next week at MIT. If you're in the area or if you want to come, get in touch with Paul Beyer and he can get you in. It looks to be a fabulous conference.
And yeah, huge one, more than 1,000 people. It's on April 15th. Okay, great. So we have 1 essential, 2 importance, and 3 optionals today. The 25 AI Index report is worth perusing. So that's an essential one. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ankash. We'll see, and thank the participants, Vivek, Ram, and we'll see you all tomorrow.